2017 was a great year in film, and it's pretty hard to make a list of my favorite movies of the year because there was just so many great ones. There were great blockbusters, there were great superhero films, there were great indie films, there were great action films, drama pieces. The only genre that kind of sucked this year was comedies, but even then, it depends on which movie you're talking about. It's just movies from other genres were kind of funny, but I don't think there was really one straight up funny movie this entire year. It kind of sucked. But for the last 2 years, I've been doing a top 10 favorite films of the year. This year, I'm going to do a top 20. I started compiling the list. I started getting all these honorable mentions, and I got to a point where I was like, I better just do a top 20 because there's too many movies to talk about. I can't add another 15 movies to the honorable mentions. That'll just go on for way too long. So here it is, my top 20 favorite films of 2017. Number 20 is a controversial one because I always have that one movie that I really like, but critically and from the audience perspective, everybody hates it. Everyone thought the movie was bad or not original or just a repeat of what's been done before. That for me was Suburbicon. That was a movie directed by George Clooney. It starred Matt Damon. It had a Coen Brothers feel to it, and I don't know, I loved every second of it. Coming out of the theater, I was pretty surprised by the reviews and the audience reaction because I thought the movie was pretty interesting. I thought it kind of had a dark sense of humor. People maybe had a problem with the fact that it had two storylines that maybe didn't converge well with one another, but then again, there's a lot of movies that I like that do that kind of thing that I'm usually able to ignore. I'm usually able to ignore the fact that two storylines maybe don't come together perfectly. The performances were great. Matt Damon, that was his best role of the year, so I don't know. I liked it, but I can understand why a lot of people didn't. Number 19 is The Big Sick. So I didn't know anything about this movie when it hit theaters, but I saw it later on Blu-ray, and yeah, it was pretty funny. The main actor, Kumail Nanjiani, wrote the screenplay with his wife, and they based it on real-life events. It was pretty funny. I liked the fact that I got to know who this actor actually was because he did an episode of SNL that was probably the best episode so far this year, and it got me interested in figuring out what his other work is. He seems like a great stand-up comedian, and his movie was just as good. It was produced by Judd Apatow, and like a lot of Judd Apatow films, it goes a little long. It could probably be a little bit funnier and just seems to go a little too serious at times. That's why I wouldn't really categorize this movie as a straight-up comedy, but as being a romantic piece about people who come from different worlds and the different topics that are brought up through the film in really interesting and funny ways, I think the film is a hit. So number 18 might seem like a strange choice seeing that it never hit theaters, but it's a movie that when I saw it, I loved from beginning to end. That would be Hey Arnold, the Jungle Movie. Watching the movie, I was pretty sad that the movie that did hit the big screen in 2002, Hey Arnold, the movie, was the one that got the theatrical release because that movie was not as good as this movie at all. This movie is clearly the superior product. It continues the storyline of Hey Arnold, it keeps the original humor and tone of the TV show, and it's kind of an interesting adventure story. It's original, it's a lot of fun, it's actually pretty funny at a lot of parts, a lot funnier than I expected it to be, especially being a kid's film, but I guess it's more aimed at older audiences at this point. It didn't have older humor, it's just that the humor seemed so good for being a kid's TV show. It's not something that I normally expect from Nickelodeon. Definitely a timeless kind of movie, and it's just a lot of fun. I liked it a lot. Number 17 is Star Wars: The Last Jedi. Seeing this movie, I didn't think that this would be the most controversial film of the year. It's amazing the different opinions everyone's having about it, how divisive people are getting about it. Some people are calling it the worst Star Wars movie ever. Yeah, okay, give me a break on that one. I don't know if I could buy that opinion from anybody. I mean, we got films like Phantom Menace, we got Attack of the Clones, my god. While The Last Jedi definitely has moments where the film begins to run a little long, and it has some storylines that may seem a little pointless, I think the overall themes that come into the movie, especially involving the Force, is what makes the film great. Mark Hamill is absolutely amazing as Luke Skywalker. I wish he would get an acting nomination for the film, which he probably won't since it's a sci-fi pew 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 blockbuster movie, so Oscars will just ignore it. I also like that they continued the storylines of Rey and Poe. I liked some of the new characters. I like the Porgs, so I don't know, maybe that's what made it or broke it for people. I don't know. But I thought the film perfectly continued The Force Awakens. It's a perfect parallel to The Force Awakens. A lot of the events and mysteries brought up in The Force Awakens are twisted and turned in The Last Jedi. While the film's first two acts definitely rip off a ton from Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, well, The Force Awakens did the same thing, but the last act of the film is some of the most original stuff we've gotten in Star Wars in years. I loved it. I thought it was epic. I thought the film was huge. It's definitely the best cinematography in the entire new films that have been made by Disney, and I'm looking forward to what's next. So number 16 is Lady Bird. This was a movie that when I saw the trailer I wasn't too interested in because I feel like I had seen the movie before. It seems like every time one of these independent films about teenagers comes out, it's always about the quirky teenager who doesn't fit in, and then they just go on quirky adventures with like acoustic independent music playing in the background. Anything that's kind of like Juno. Maybe that's kind of biased of me, but it always seems like it's the same movie. While Lady Bird definitely has a lot of that, it's really Saoirse Ronan that saves the film by bringing a wonderful acting performance, as well as Laurie Metcalf, who plays her mother. The dynamic between the mother and daughter is definitely something that perfectly parallels what real-life mother and daughter relationships are, from what I've seen anyway. I thought it was a really funny film. I thought it was a really great ending. The ending was actually something that really tugged at my heartstrings. In a lot of ways, I kind of related to the ending. Greta Gerwig, who directed the film, it's amazing that this is her directorial debut. I really hope that she gets some sort of nomination later. She kind of went ignored at the Golden Globes, so we'll see what happens at the Academy Awards. Number 15 is Thor Ragnarok. Pretty crazy. I never thought there would be a Thor movie that I would like more in a year than a Star Wars movie. It's amazing that the third Thor film ended up being as good as it was. The first two Thor films I think are completely forgettable. Thor has always been a character that I've disliked the most, but then here comes Thor Ragnarok to bring some of the most fun and inventive stuff that's ever been brought into a Marvel Cinematic Universe film. The story is quick-paced, it's a lot of fun, there's great characters and a lot of great returning characters. There's also a bunch of great new characters, specifically Tessa Thompson as Valkyrie and Jeff Goldblum as the Grandmaster. Those were two great new characters, and what I really liked about this movie was the different themes that it brought in about erasing history and learning from it, and the types of relationships you have with your family that you may or may not agree or disagree with the types of things that they did in their past. So I thought it brought a lot of emotion into the franchise. I think it took some exciting turns and had a pretty surprising ending. So I don't know. I think it was really great. Some of the best stuff that the Marvel Cinematic Universe has ever done. Number 14 is The Florida Project. This is a movie that I only wanted to see it because I heard that Disney World was at the end of the film. Seeing it, it didn't really utilize the ending the way I thought they were going to do, but it was still a really great and interesting film. Willem Dafoe is amazing because usually he plays kind of a villainous or sort of anarchist kind of role, but here he's kind of a sentimental, humble, just guy trying to keep up this trashy, hotel that he knows people are living at because they have no money and they're just kind of going nowhere in life. This movie brings in an interesting side of the USA that you kind of never see done in film. It's got great performances. It's got really emotional meaning to it. There's a lot of great themes in it. It's about characters that you'll probably never see in any other blockbuster film for sure. So I really think that this film is important for people to see. It really shows the dark side that's hidden in Florida that's just kind of right under the noses of people who are going to Disney World. I think it's great, especially the kids who are in the movie, and just the hardships that everybody has to go through, especially when they're kids or when they're even the adults in life. Number 13 is Logan. It's amazing that this movie is still being talked about all these months later, seeing as it came out in March. This is probably one of the best X-Men movies ever made. Hugh Jackman is great as the Wolverine once again. The movie is more of a Western than it is a superhero film, and I really like that. I like that the film is simple and it's more focusing on the character dynamics between Xavier and Logan and the new character who's X-23, I believe. Now I don't even remember her name, but anyway, like, I thought it was really fun. Well, not even fun. It was fun in the sense that it had great action and everything, but it's not really a fun film. It's dark, it's got some really serious moments, and it's got an emotional ending. It's some of the best stuff that you'll see in any superhero film ever, and I'm glad that at this point, this film comes forward and says, no, we can take the superhero genre and do something completely different with it. So I like it for that. And I really like that there was a black and white version, and this is a version that I think might be even better than the color version, so if you haven't seen that version, I'd check it out. Number 12 is SpiderMan Homecoming. Yeah, this is my favorite of the superhero films this year. I really liked the fact that they had a great story to go along with kind of a new take on the character. I like all the other Spider-Man films except for The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which is one of the worst films I've ever seen, but the rest of them have always done a different way of presenting the character, and this film does the very same thing. I really like the villain in the film, played by Michael Keaton. I like all the side characters. This is one of those films where a lot of the side characters fill up a lot of the film, and even if they have one line or even less, they're still memorable to me. So it's just it's a lot of fun. It's a great high school film. It kind of brings you back to those old John Hughes-likes films, and I didn't expect that I would like it as much as I did, but here we are. It had some of the best action in any of the Spider-Man films. They finally took Spider-Man out of New York. It just did a lot of things that I hadn't seen yet in the Spider-Man film. It was an original take on the character, and I think Tom Holland's gonna go far with it. Number 11 is Blade Runner 2049. This is a film that's probably on here more for the beauty of it rather than for the story of it. The story is kind of simple. There's a bit of a mystery going on. Ryan Gosling is amazing as the main lead. I think he's one of the best actors that are out there right now, and he just keeps getting in these really great films, and this is another one. I really like that the film continues the storyline of Blade Runner and kind of evolves the world that Blade Runner was originally in to kind of bring it to modern times. I like the fact that it kind of has a few twists and turns here and there. You don't really guess the ending as well as you think you would have. You kind of, halfway through the film, you think, oh, I know where this movie's going to go with all this, but then it begins to do things here and there that kind of surprise you, and Ryan Gosling's character goes on an emotional journey pretty much. It's almost a film that I don't recommend to people just because it is a bit long, and I don't mind the length, but there's definitely going to be people who do mind the length. They're going to mind that it's kind of long, there's a lot of long shots and takes and a lot of kind of nothing going on, and it's sort of what the original Blade Runner was, except that movie was only 2 hours. This one's nearly 2.5, maybe even 3 hours long, but it's beautiful nonetheless. It's a great looking film. It's got great characters. The only thing I didn't really like about it was Jared Leto, but thank God he was hardly in it, so that was nice. Definitely one of the most beautiful films made this year, and I was glad that Blade Runner was given justice. I'm glad that they did a sequel that, while I thought would be impossible to even be compared to the original, it definitely represents itself pretty well. It's gonna stand the test of time. Number 10 is Marshall. This is a movie that I didn't know anything about before seeing. I just had heard the name. I heard that Chadwick Boseman was in it. And I said, all right, let's go. Oh yeah, and then of course there was also Josh Gad who's in it. And it's about Thurgood Marshall, and one of the cases that he was solving way back in the 50s when segregation was heavily going on. It's kind of almost like an old style version of like a Lethal Weapon type movie, you know, sort of like a buddy cop. There's a dynamic between the both of them that really carries this film. This film is basically just them, and that's the only reason to see this movie. There's nothing really else to it, but it's got a lot of important themes that I think are still pretty relevant today. It's got great performances, it's got a really quick-paced nature to it all, and it's a movie that probably will go completely ignored once award season comes around, but I think it was really great. It's 100% enjoyable. It's like an old-style buddy cop movie. Number 9 is Coco. So this is a movie that I wasn't too excited for. I didn't really know anything about it, but hey, if it's got the name Pixar in it, I trust that'll be good. And this one was amazing. It's got an original story. It's got great culture in it. It's got a great main character that you follow throughout the entire film, and you really want him to succeed in his journey. It's got emotional moments, especially between him and his grandmother, between his other relatives who are in the land of the dead, and it's just got an original look to it. I really like the fact that it uses the color orange, which may be weird, but that's kind of a color that you never see used in films ever. It's always blues and reds and greens, and that's about it. Orange is heavily used in this film. I liked it. The animation is top-notch, some of the best that Pixar's ever done. It's an interesting story. In fact, it takes a couple turns that are almost pretty dark for what you would see in a kid's movie, but I'm glad they did it because this is stuff that kids can handle, and they need to see a movie like this. It's all about the deep roots that you have with family and why family is so important. It's it surprised me just how good it was. Number 8 is 3 Billboards Outside of Ebbing, Missouri. That's a really long title, but other than that, the movie is really, really good. It's a dark comedy, a black comedy actually, and it's got great performances by Frances McDermott. Really, the rock of this film, though, is Sam Rockwell as one of the police officers. He goes on this journey of kind of being an a-hole to being sort of a redeeming character. The movie has a lot of serious topics that are very relevant to today. It's got a really great representation of a small town. I come from a small town, and a lot of movies usually get it wrong, or they're a little biased, or they just kind of do a really one-sided view of how small towns are, but I think this movie did a really great, excellent job of showing all the different sides and aspects to living in a small town. I like that all the supporting characters have different dynamics, and there's a lot of thinking that is brought into the audience's head. The movie takes twists and turns you wouldn't think would happen, and once you get to the end, you're left with a lot of questions of morality and what is right and what is wrong, and it really puts into question the ideas of that. What exactly is right and what exactly is wrong? In fact, by the end of the film, it's almost like both characters did do things that were wrong, but you still forgive them anyway. So it's a weird path that you take with all these characters. Not just the 2 main characters, but all these other characters that are only slightly involved, only have a couple minutes on screen, but they all have a question that's brought into your head about morality. Number 7 is American Made. What I call basically the best Wolf of Wall Street ripoff ever. It's very similar to that movie. It's got a heavily 80s-like style to it, and it's got a great soundtrack. Tom Cruise, who is one of my favorite actors, I really enjoy him in this movie, and it's a really quick-paced, fun movie that just takes you on this wild adventure of this crazy guy who was just doing a lot of illegal stuff, just trying to make some money. American Made, I think that name alone kind of implies the American dream, but how it's sort of broken but can still be fixed to a person's needs or wants or ability, even though like some of the things he was doing was illegal. So it's kind of a tragic story almost, but it's so much fun. Domhnall Gleeson. Domhnall Gleeson is the CIA agent, and this is one of his best roles, I think. He's just playing it so laid back, and please go see it. It's easily one of the, well, obviously it's one of the best. Number 7 on my list, so go see it. Number 6 is the Lego Batman movie. I actually have it right here. It's one of the best it is the best animated film of this year. It emulates that same style that was in the Lego movie, while also having great Batman jokes in there. The character of Batman is great, and I think what it really came down to for being my favorite animated film is that I really just like the family dynamic between Batman and Robin and Barbara Gordon and Alfred. I just like that there's just sort of a weird, kooky family there, and Batman just kind of has to discover a family. It's a story that, you know, if you haven't seen the movie, you're like, well, that's pretty obvious, because that's the whole joke. Oh, Batman don't have a family because they died, and so he's a loner, and he needs to learn to not be a loner. But the movie, I don't know, it just does a great job of showing that, even though it's not that original of a story. I just think it's almost done in an original way. And the score actually is really good. I really like the score of this movie, strangely. I didn't think that that would be one of the highlights for me, but it is. The music is just great. It's got great animation. The characters and all the voice acting is done really well. It's easily the funniest movie that was made this year, so go check it out. Number 5 is Logan Lucky. I've been waiting for Steven Soderbergh to be back in the directing chair for quite some time. I really liked the Oceans trilogy, so when I heard he was doing another heist film, I got really excited, and it did not disappoint. This is basically Ocean's 11, but done with a bunch of rednecks. It's done with also a lot of heart. There's a lot more heart to this film than you would even think. The ending scene is very tear-jerking. The screenplay was obviously written with all these characters who had a lot of strange quirks to them, and it's done in such a laid-back way that, you know, if you've seen the Oceans trilogy, it's kind of the same sort of style. It's just a laid-back heist film with a lot of quirky humor. You normally don't get these kind of performances out of Adam Driver or Daniel Craig or Channing Tatum. It's a lot of fun. Number 4 is Get Out. This is Jordan Peele's directorial debut. Easily one of the most original horror films that I've seen in years, with a topic that is so extremely relevant that I can understand why it's still being talked about during award season. This movie is even getting talked about for a Best Picture nomination, which, if it gets that, I'll be really excited. I'd be surprised even, because the movie is just so weird too. The Oscars never really go after the weird movies, but it's got horror elements, it's got comedy elements, it's even got some sci-fi elements, and it's terrifying. It's actually a terrifying movie. Easily, Jordan Peele definitely has some interesting ideas, and I'm excited to see him do some other movies, because if he's gonna be pumping out original content like this, then give him all the money in the world. Number 3 is War for the Planet of the Apes. This Apes trilogy, starting with Rise and then going on to Dawn and now War for the Planet of the Apes, I didn't expect it to be so good the entire way through. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes was just such a great film that I did not expect in any reality that War for the Planet of the Apes would even be better, but here we are. It's almost better than Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. It's a very dark and emotional film. And it's about CGI gorillas, or apes. I don't want to be rude to them, but you know, Woody Harrelson's in the film. This is his best role of the year. It's very intense, a lot of intensity between all the characters. Steve Zahn's in the film as one of the apes, and I really enjoyed his character. It's a lot different than any of the other ape characters we've ever gotten, even in the old series. This is just a very original character. It's amazing how they're transitioning into the original series so seamlessly, and they're answering so many questions that the original film would kind of contradict. I just really like the intensity of this film. It's a film that it's not fun. I can see why it wasn't a huge blockbuster this year. There's a lot of mystery to it. There's a journey that's had between the apes. There's a lot of relationships that continue to grow that you've seen grow in the past films. It ends on a very emotional climax that I didn't really even see coming, because I didn't know if they were going to end this on the trilogy, and they almost kind of give it sort of an ending. I could see there being a 4th film, but I really think if they end it here, it's going to be marked as one of the great trilogies of all time. Number 2 was A Disaster Artist. I just saw this movie, and then I went and saw it again immediately after. This movie perfectly represents The Room and why it's such a strange movie made by such a strange guy. I know a lot about The Room, and I knew a lot about Tommy Wiseau, and I was kind of scared that James Franco was going to be making the film with a lot of his close buddies. I figured that it'd be a case of not enough voices being heard and a lot of decisions being made without other people being involved. But James Franco really knew what he was going for with this movie, and he must have made all the right creative decisions because it is a funny movie. It is an emotional movie. It's a movie that you don't really like the main character, but you still want to see him succeed because you see what he's going up against. He's trying to defy all odds, and by the end, he certainly does, but he's still not really a great character. He's not a good person, but James Franco's portrayal of him is absolutely amazing. It's kind of a dark tale about how the Hollywood system works, but how he just went up against it and said, screw it, I'm going to do it my own way. But by the end, you're like, yeah, but is he still a good guy? Is this really a true underdog story? And he puts it into question, but I think it's really about that no matter what kind of success you have, you can have success even in your failure. It's kind of a strange moral to get out of a movie, but I really liked it. Before I get to my favorite film, there's just a couple other movies that I want to mention. One is All the Money in the World, which I just saw. It's really great. Christopher Plummer, Mark Wahlberg, and Michelle Williams have really great performances in it. I thought that the movie could have been a little better than it was, but it was still a great movie, just not in the top 20 great. I also really liked Detroit. John Boyega's in that movie. I think he basically owns the movie. It's a very long movie, but it doesn't feel as long as it does. I think it's nearly 2.5 hours, but there's an entire hour that just takes place in a hotel that's super intense. It, the movie It, featuring It the Clown. That was a great movie. It took place in the 80s and it had an 80s vibe to it. I liked all the young kid characters. It's rare that you see so many good portrayals out of young actors like that, but it was not as scary as I was hoping it would be, but it was still really good. I like the fact that it took place in the 80s. Captain Underpants, another animated comedy superhero film, just like Lego Batman movie. The movie was just really funny start to finish, and that's really all I got out of the movie, was that it was funny. But hey, yeah, it was a great comedy, so if you're looking for something funny, I would recommend that movie. Wonder Woman, that was another great superhero film. Really like Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. It kind of reminds me of Christopher Reeve when he was playing Superman. He just was the definitive Superman, and she just is the definitive Wonder Woman. I like that it took its subject matter, even though it's kind of a silly comic book and it takes place in World War I. I like that they took it seriously. And they also had a lot more jokes in it than a typical DC movie has. I think the other DC movies need to emulate the kind of style that Patty Jenkins brought to Wonder Woman. Life, which was a movie that starred Ryan Reynolds and Jake Gyllenhaal. Jake Gyllenhaal was in this movie, Life. It's basically an Alien ripoff. But I thought the movie was terrifying still. I thought that the design of the alien was pretty cool. And then you had Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. While I didn't like it as much as the original Guardians of the Galaxy, I thought it was a little too humorous here and there. The jokes were a little too much. The film was still beautiful, and it had a lot of emotional moments to it. And even with the huge amount of jokes, yeah, it's still a really funny movie. With a great villain, by the way, played by Kurt Russell, one of the best, probably the best villain to come out of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, so there is that. Alright, but here it is. My favorite film of 2017 is Baby Driver. I mean, come on, it's Edgar Wright. This movie was almost my favorite movie before it even came out. Anytime there's an Edgar Wright movie, it's really hard for him to disappoint. I got really excited for this movie simply because it was Edgar Wright, and yet he was still able to deliver a film that exceeded my expectations. It's fast-paced, it's got great music, it's got great characters, it's got great humor, it's got great acting, it's got great cinematography, it's got great editing, which is the best thing about Edgar Wright films is just that superb editing style. The screenplay is perfectly designed to be prepared for literally every stage that the film Edgar Wright makes. He has everything planned, it seems like anyway. I mean, the way the music is balanced and everything, it's an unbelievable film. All the characters are basic archetypes, but they do things that you wouldn't normally expect out of that archetype. They all sort of break the chain, and the movie does things that, you know, to me, it surprises me. It does things that I wasn't expecting to happen out of a typical blockbuster action film like this. This movie just had everything, and it even had a Monsters, Inc. Reference. So how can you go wrong there? So tune in for the upcoming week. I'll be doing a top 10 worst films of the year, which I've never done before, but I saw a lot of stinkers this year. I normally don't see so many bad movies in theaters, but for some reason this year, since there were so many great films, it was amazing that I still saw quite a few bad ones. I was like, why am I watching this in theaters? So we'll be getting to that pretty soon, but thanks for watching.